So today, December 8th, 2021, important anniversary for me. It has been 10 years since I started writing computer games. I started with the game of Othello, 8x8 Othello, also known as Reversi. To understand why I started writing computer games, you got to go back a little bit in my life. So I was getting ready to graduate with my PhD, but at the time, most of my peers were either married or in committed relationships, and I was a little bit concerned that I didn't have a significant other attending my graduation. I frantically wanted to meet somebody, and I thought just before I graduate, I'll have one more eye-catching event that might stir up a little attention. Even if I don't get into a long-term committed relationship, I needed a relationship that was long enough just so she could attend my graduation. That was what I was shooting for at the time. I had a hard time imagining myself on stage graduating without a significant other. This was 10 years ago. Today it wouldn't bother me, but 10 years ago was a different story. You gotta understand, as a PhD candidate, I also did some teaching assistance work, and I would see a lot of students who were experimenting with their bodies, right? And then I would see my peers who were in committed relationships, and I wasn't involved in any of that. I was happy being single, I just wasn't happy on stage being single. To this day, I still run into that problem, less so than 10 years ago. And so I decided that if I wrote a #1 computer game in the world, right, go to a few contests, that it might stir up just enough attention that I get somebody to come to my graduation. That was my only goal at the time. So I started researching about, I had already written an Othello AI for a class project, and I decided to ramp it up to try to compete in the Computer Olympiad. Now, I competed in my first Computer Olympiad 2 years later in August of 2013. And I got mid-range. I didn't get a gold medal that year. And I continued to learn more about different algorithms. And I started writing machine learning code in 2016. Now in 2016, the puzzle game of 2048 was the craze, and that was the first game that I ever decided to try a machine learning algorithm with. Now that year, I got into strife with a girl that I was dating. She was many years my junior. She lived with her parents. And one weekend, I was really late getting to her home to see her because I had been so hung up writing an AI for the game of 2048. It was a craze at the time, that game. She was upset. She accused me of cheating on her, and I felt guilty too. In a way, I felt like I was cheating on her, but not with another girl, but with the computer game. And we had argued, and she didn't like the fact that I was writing these computer games, and I didn't like the fact that she couldn't accept that I balanced the games with seeing her, and so I stormed out of her home. And I was so lost in thought that I was only supposed to drive a few miles away to my home, and I decided to go sightsee a little bit first. And I was so lost in thought that instead of driving from her home in Bellevue to my home in Redmond, I ended up in Ellensburg, and it was a very dark night, and I got to see the Milky Way overhead. This was March of 2016 that I'm talking about. So in March, toward the tail end of the night, you can see the Milky Way. And it was after that time that I discovered this is a very nice place to view all sorts of stargazing events, right? Ever since then, I've gone there many, many times to view various things. Lunar eclipses, conjunctions, Andromeda, various planets in conjunction with the moon, various planets in opposition. I love Jupiter in opposition. I haven't missed one of those since then. I love Jupiter in general, just getting to see the moons of Jupiter. I especially love it when I can get all 4 of Jupiter's moons spread out and get a good photo of that. And after I never saw that girl again, and I wished her well. And nowadays, I can't imagine getting so involved in a girl that I don't have personal space. Right? That's why I thought that graduation was kind of silly. Now looking back at it, I competed in a couple more Computer Olympiad conferences. One in Taiwan in 2018, and then another one in Macau in 2019. And I had a bad dream during my conference in Macau. I dreamt about another ex-girlfriend of mine, not the one that caused me to storm out and go stargazing, another one. I dreamt that I was in another city at a Computer Olympiad, and she was with her husband. She's not actually married in real life, but in my dream she was married. And I dreamt that I had gotten into the elevator to go to the conference room, and I had held the door for the 2 of them. And my ex-girlfriend looked at her husband and said, "Don't get in the elevator with this guy. He has a disease." And they turned away. This was 2019. This wasn't because of social distancing or something like that caused me to dream about. This was 2019 that I'm talking about. And I woke up shaking. And because somebody would turn away from me like I had some kind of plague. And it was around that time that I decided maybe my eating habits were out of control. I used to have binge eating kind of problems. The dream was one of the pivotal moments that made me realize maybe my eating is a little bit out of hand. And so not long after that, I started taking steps to correct my eating disorder problems. Today, I'm actually 26 hours into fasting because I was commemorating Pearl Harbor Day. It's the 80th anniversary, and also it's the 10-year anniversary of my computer games. But also, intermittent fasting has really helped with my eating desires, right? Ever since I started intermittent fasting, every time I eat something, it becomes an actual action, right? I don't impulsively or subconsciously eat anymore, right? It's an actual action that I have to take to eat. I used to eat without thinking. Now, then in March of 2020, after we learned about social distancing, I started to feel less bad about that dream. That dream haunted me for 9 months until it actually came true, and I'm like, oh, okay. And that first day we locked down, I was living in my car, actually. I used to live in my car 3 seasons out of the year, if you can believe that, because it was nice and comfortable, and I'd rather have those resources to go to the Computer Olympiad, to go network with the right people, and at the time to binge eat and stuff my face, right? Unfortunately. That was more important than having a home to live in at the time, if you can believe it. Now, I started, that first day of the lockdown, I frantically looked for somewhere to move in. I went on Airbnb, and it was really cheap because nobody wanted to travel at the time. And I found a local Airbnb to move into I think I booked it for 3 or 4 weeks. And I started to take my mind off of what was going on. I started writing an AI for the game of backgammon. And I named the program, let's see if we can pull up the name. And it's gone through a few versions, but I named the program Corona Gammon. And it's gone through a few versions. Delta, Mu, and now Omicron. That's what I named the version of Corona Gammon that I wrote. Different optimizations of machine learning. I'd say the big improvement was from the original one to the Delta one. Delta to Omicron, a few tweaks and patches, but not all that different. And so to take my mind off of it, I started writing Corona Gammon, and I entered that into the Computer Olympiad later that year. I haven't entered Omicron yet, only the Delta one, and that one was number 1 in 2021, so Omicron's probably even better. and obviously these last 2 years I've been crazy with the computer games because we haven't been able to do very much else. Now, this past year, I've been preaching about being happily single, but lately I've been wanting to meet somebody who I can share being happily single with, right? I'm not terribly opposed to the idea that I might marry somebody who is also happily single, and we can be happily single together. I know that sounds kind of like an oxymoron, but more and more I'm seeing that possibility. Now, the problem here in the United States is that it's very difficult, when you first go on a date with somebody, it's very difficult to find out what their objective in life is, right? You can't just ask somebody if they plan on having children, what their sexual orientation is. Here in the United States, we're way too sensitive to ask anybody that on a first date, right? That's part of the reason why I wanted to leave the United States during the pandemic, right? I like to be able to, in Taiwan it's not uncommon, right? In Taiwan you go to a grocery store, people openly talk about sex, relationships, their views on having children, their career choices. People openly talk about that everywhere. Here in the United States, we're way too sensitive, and it really impedes in meeting the right person, right? You got to go on lots of dates and with people you're not compatible with before you realize you're not compatible with them, right? That's one thing I really despise. Anyways, it's been 10 years, and I look forward to at least another 100 years of developing computer games.